What's up guys, Julian here, and this is episode 3 of a series of videos where I search for the perfect lens for documentary filmmaking. Today we are talking about the Sony 16-55mm F2.8. This is an APS-C lens for Sony cameras, and I honestly think that this is going to be the one for me right now, because it's got a lot of the features that I'm looking for. It's got super reliable autofocus. It has a focal range of 16 to 55, which in full frame is about the equivalent of 24 to 85, which is great. Like, to get that wide and at 24 millimeters, and then to zoom in to 85 millimeters for those nice tight shots at a constant f2.8. That's great. That's really great. And there's a lot of things to love about this lens. And if you've ever seen a comparison video between this lens and the Sigma 18-50 and the Tamron 17-70, all f2.8, you'll know that they have a lot of similarities and they share a very similar focal range. Except this one is the oldest. And honestly, I think the image quality from this one is slightly better than the others. The others are really good, but it's slightly better. The issue with the Tamron is that past 50 or 60, it starts getting a bit soft in the focal range. So I've been using this lens a few times now, and I really love it. And honestly, one of my favorite things about this lens is that it's like 90% parfocal. So whatever you're focused on when you're zoomed all the way out, you will still be focused on when you zoom all the way in. And this is a very, very common feature. In fact, this is almost mandatory for cinema lenses. But on photo lenses, that is really rare. But this one is like 90% there. And why I say 90 is because it's slightly off. If you're zoomed all the way in and then you zoom out, you're not going to notice. It's such a small difference, you won't notice. But if you're in focus while you're zoomed out and then you zoom in without autofocus, you're going to notice that it's slightly off. But if you have autofocus on, you won't notice, because it's such a small difference that the autofocus is going to fix it almost immediately. Another reason why I would pick this lens over the Tamron 17-70 and Sigma 18-50 is because of the bokeh. And I'm not usually one to pixel peep and to look at the bokeh balls and get super detailed about them, but I do think that it makes a bit of a difference. And I did notice the difference when I was trying out these lenses, is that the bokeh on the Sony was a lot smoother. It was much more pleasing to look at, less distracting. I often get this with Tamron lenses, is that the out of focus area just looks a little bit too distracting, and I don't like that. I like that it looks a bit more smooth. Any cinema lens that you check out, the background will be nice and smooth. Why I think this is a great documentary lens is, yeah, first of all, that focal range. And the aperture of f2.8 is great, especially for my Sony FX30, which doesn't have the best low light capabilities. So it needs a bit of help. So having the 2.8 is very helpful. When it comes to filmmaking in general, I like to not be completely reliant on autofocus, because in my experience, autofocus can just mess you up in the wrong moments. Just when you want to be focused on something particular, autofocus decides, no, actually, I'm going to focus on this over here, and completely ruin your shot, which I don't like, and I don't think anyone else likes that. So having complete control over your focus is a huge bonus for me and very important. But with a native Sony lens like this, with phenomenal autofocus capabilities, and the FX30 also with amazing autofocus, I've never had a problem with it. As much as I've been using it, I've never had a problem, which is awesome. Of course, there's moments where it will choose a face to focus on instead of a hand doing something in the foreground. So then I have to switch over to manual focusing. And with this lens, that's very easy to do because there's a function button. So what I end up doing is I set the function button to autofocus, manual focus switch. So I just press that and then I've got manual focusing. And the manual focusing with this is really nice. It's just very quick. And of course, with a lot of these new photo lenses, the focusing elements are not linear. So it's fly-by-wire, which means there's no hard stops and there's no consistency. So yeah, it's a bit difficult sometimes, but once you've got the hang of it, it actually is really nice to be able to quickly move your focus. But as I said in my previous video, I would really prefer to have about 180 degrees of focus throw. That just gives me a sweet spot between control and not having to twist multiple times to get to focus rack. This I think is like 60 degrees of focus. So it's really quick, but it's also the same as my Sigma. So I'm quite used to that. So that hasn't been an issue for me, and I love that I can just switch between autofocus and manual focus right here on the lens instead of somewhere on my camera. So like I said, I've had the privilege of testing out this lens a few times, as well as other lenses that I'll be talking about on this channel and have already been talking about on this channel. And that's where today's sponsor comes in, Maloney Amsterdam. Maloney Amsterdam is a camera gear rental company that caters for high-end professionals and beginner videographers with everyone in between. They have a huge catalog of cameras, lenses, audio, lighting, grip, and so much more to help support filmmakers at any stage of their journey and for any video project that you have. I believe that one of the best practices you can have when you're looking at investing in new gear is to try before you buy. Test it out, rent it before you drop your savings on it. So if you're in the Netherlands and you need gear for a shoot, you can make a booking on their website, Maloney Amsterdam, link in the description. Big thanks to Maloney for being this channel's first sponsor. All right, let's get back to talking about this lens. So what I want to do with you right now is I want to compare the Sony 16-55 with my Sigma 18-35. So right now I have the Sigma 18-35 on. I've got it zoomed all the way out, as far out as it can go. I've got it set at f2.8 so that I can more closely compare the image quality and sharpness with the Sony 16-55. So this is what it looks like, as tight as it can go. And one of the things I've mentioned before is that this has really great clear image zoom. And yeah, I'm curious to see how this compares in terms of sharpness using the clear image zoom to using this. So let's swap out lenses and see how it performs. Okay, so I'm not going to adjust anything else in the room, so you can see the field of view is quite a bit different. So we're actually getting a little bit of my softbox in the corner there. You can see a lot more of the background. And this is why I love 16mm. And honestly, also for my YouTube channel, if I don't want to use the DJI Pocket 3 and I want to use my FX30, I'd much rather use the 16mm on here rather than the 18 on here. One of the other things I notice immediately is the size difference. This with the adapter on the back here is huge by comparison to the Sony 16-55. Okay, so now we're looking at the sharpness. The f-stop is of course exactly the same, so the exposure should be exactly the same. I'm curious to see. I don't think that's going to be different. Okay, so this should give me a pretty similar focal range to the Sigma zoomed all the way out with the clear image zoom of my FX30. So I'm very curious to see how that compares. And yeah, let me know what you think. Do you prefer the image quality that's coming out of the Sigma or out of the Sony? For my documentary work, a 16mm is just great. I love to be close and intimate with my subjects, but also to get their environment. I love to know what's happening in their world, what's happening around them. To have a 16-55 compared to an 18-35 makes a huge difference in the shot variety that you're going to get. You have 5 focal lengths in one lens. Compared to the Sigma, you only get 3. So in terms of shot variety, you're going to get a lot more out of the Sony, and that's why I like it, because I don't want to be swapping out lenses. I don't want to have this lens and a 100mm with a 16mm to get different shots, and then I miss the moment because I'm switching lenses. I want one lens that captures it all. Alright guys, so I think that's pretty conclusive that I really like this lens. I honestly have not been able to find any faults with it. It is a little bit more expensive than the Sigma 18-50 and Tamron 17-70, but for what you get, the extra wide and the great image quality, the weather sealing, the parfocalness, I really think this is such a great lens. Alright guys, thanks for watching. For the next video, I might be comparing this to the Laowa 17-70. Let me know if that would be something interesting for you. Otherwise, there's a whole lot of lenses to test out. I love testing lenses, so yeah. Let me know what you think. If there's any lenses you want me to test out, let me know in the comments and I'll get to it. Alright guys, see you in the next one. Cheers.